Okay, good day, guys. It's Half Hope here with a very, very exclusive interview. So before I introduce my guest, Mr. Jonah Hyams, just have to obviously thank him for doing this. But really, again, as you know, what I've been talking about all this time is really being a huge supporter of old school action films, no CG blood, bringing back that 80s vibe of action films, and I've been preaching about universal soldier regeneration, and again watching Day of Reckoning, and it was really watching Day of Reckoning that really just spawned me to say, you know what, I've got to reach out to Mr. Jonah Hyams and really thank him, and thus, out of his kindness, actually agreed to do this interview. So again, Mr. Hyams, welcome and thank you for doing this interview.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let me just start off with the first question. So the first question is, what was the catalyst that made you say you wanted to direct films? And was this your famous father, Mr. Peter Hyams? Was it him nudging you to do this, or was this solely your choice?
Well, it was definitely my choice, but I would say that, I grew up in a household where film was something that all of us, from my dad to my brothers to my mother, we all had a great love of film, and my two brothers and I, we grew up basically on spending a lot of time on film sets from the time we were very young.
Okay.
So I think that we developed a not just a love for watching movies and talking about it, but I think we developed a very early love and obsession with the process of making movies and the craft of making movies and all the different disciplines that factored into filmmaking. So I think everything from makeup effects to visual effects, which were the things that I latched onto when I was a young kid. I was really interested in makeup effects, and I was very interested in guys like Dick Smith, who were my heroes.
Okay.
And so I think that, started out early, just having the exposure to it that we did. And then my brother and I, my older brother and I, specifically, we kind of went our own way as far as our film taste. Everything from Kubrick and Scorsese and Coppola and that, but also we were huge John Carpenter fans, and we were big David Cronenberg fans. And genre fans in general, and so I always had a great love of it. But actually, when I went to college and all that, I studied art. I studied fine arts. I started out as a painter and a sculptor, and that was kind of what I intended to pursue, and that's what I did pursue, and was doing pretty well with it, and it seemed to be the thing that not only I figured I was best at, but I think everyone around me, my family included, assumed that that's what I would be, a painter, because that's what I was strongest at. And then what ended up happening was that I moved to New York City after college and was painting and surrounded by a lot of creative people that I had gone to college with or had known from and met when we were in New York. And there was just a group of people there that were, very inspiring group. And after being there for a little bit of time, I started feeling, whether or not I was always going to end up doing film or not, I remember feeling this need to collaborate with others. I would spend my days basically alone in a painting studio, which is great on one end, but I did crave kind of collaboration, especially knowing so many creative people that I wanted to work with. So we started making films and doing, very, very just guerrilla style. I made an independent, guerrilla feature that I basically financed myself.
Okay.
Just kind of to give us a chance to try things out and to work with other people. And it started developing that way, and through this group of people that I was, really enjoyed working with. And that sort of branched into doing documentaries with these guys, and so it was a very kind of organic how I got into film. So once I started it, then I started taking an interest in all aspects of it, as far as screenwriting and trying to write scripts. But really, the way I broke in was through documentaries.
Okay, okay. And just branching off what you were just saying, how much of the fine art and the painting do you feel has been an influence on the films that you make? Do you feel that it has helped you a lot? Do you feel that the tools that you gained being a painter has sort of infused in the way that you sculpt and manifest the way in which you make your films?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. I think it's, for me, it feels like an extension of the same process. I think it's probably what led me towards to editing, and the fact that I edit my own films and really kind of, because I found that not just as far as deciding the general design aesthetic of films, which of course, it's a frame, it's ultimately a two-dimensional art, so it has a lot to do compositionally with painting and representational artwork. But beyond that, I found that the film process feels very much like painting to me, in the sense that when you're going out and shooting, you're basically collecting material, which to me is very much like, I had a painting teacher who once told me that your painting is only going to look as good as your palette. Which means you start out by mixing a bunch of colors, and if your palette looks muddy, your painting's going to be muddy. So that's very, the most important part of the painting process at first is really creating a palette that you're going to work with. And to me, that's what shooting is, meaning that I don't feel like you're actually making the film, or the painting for that matter, to relate it to painting. The making of the film, the constructing of it is in editing. And editing sort of really encompasses everything, post-production, what the timing of it is, what the relationship between images are. And to me, it really I even feel that the look of the movie is often dictated in editing. Not to say that a DP doesn't have, play a very important role in lighting the scene and all of that, but what part of the shot you decide to use, and when you decide to make a cut, and what the visual momentum of the film is completely dictated by the editing process. So, and not to mention that you spend this whole period of pre-production and production collaborating with lots of people. But when you're in editing, at least for me, while you do have assistant editors or co-editors that you work with, in the end it's really just kind of, it's the closest to being alone in the studio, in the painting studio. For me, editing is me just sitting at a desk with headphones on, and it's a very intimate, cerebral process. And it's a process that I love. It's like everything is leading up to that. And so I feel like in art school, being a painter, sculptor, I developed a way of, of problem solving creatively, of a working method that seems to be exactly the way I apply myself to whatever I'm doing, films, specifically.
Oh, okay, that's very good. So actually, and again, so next question, and I think it's sort of, you sort of hinted at this question. So, were there any films in particular that inspired you? Obviously, you mentioned Kubrick, Clockwork Orange, but could you maybe name 3 films that you say had a profound impact on you and really were like a huge inspiration in every film that you make?
Well, I would say like the movies that were probably most influential to me in my life. I would say first and foremost might be Outland, when my dad made Outland. And that's because that was a movie that I was on the set of that movie almost every single day of shooting, and they edited that movie at my in our back in the back of my house, you know, growing up.
Okay.
So it's a movie that I was very intimate with the entire process of, from the designing of it. You know, I even would spend time in the office during prep, during shooting, and in post. And I think, you know, my brothers and I, or my older brother and I, my younger brother wasn't born yet, but my older brother and I really became, it was almost like we worked on the movie. You know, that's what it felt like to us. So that one made a profound impact on me. I would say Apocalypse Now probably would be the movie that I saw that when I saw that movie, I realized just how powerful a medium film is, that it can transport you to something that that is beyond just a story, and it's beyond narrative, and it's beyond character. It's a whole experience, and that's a movie that when I first saw it, I was a young kid, and I watch it every couple of years ever since then, and I still get something from it, and it holds up every bit as much today as it did then. So in many ways, I'd say that was my favorite film ever. I would say Alien had a big impact on me as a movie. The first Alien, Ridley Scott's, that at the time when I saw that, it was really the most, again, was a young kid when I saw it, and it was really the most frightening, suspenseful movie I'd ever seen up to that point. And the way that he created such a believable world in such an unbelievable setting, it had a major impact on me. But, you know, I will say that my tastes in films and the kind of path that my taste has followed has certainly gone different directions. Whereas, like, very early on, I was very inspired by genre and that kind of thing. But as I got a little older, the movies that really impacted me were the films of Woody Allen. You know, Woody Allen is one of my favorite directors ever, and Scorsese and Taxi Driver, and Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Goodfellas. Those had a major impact on me. I mean, Scorsese really taught me about subjective filmmaking, and how there's no one I've really ever seen do as brilliant a job of putting you in the head of the characters and giving you a feeling of telling a story from within a world rather than the outside looking in. So I would say Scorsese's a major influence. And then I would just say, in their entirety, the films of Kubrick, in many ways for the same reason as Apocalypse Now, in the sense that Kubrick's films are experiences, you know, and they transport you, and you no longer do any of the rules that apply to any other film seem to apply to what you're seeing with him, and you don't even hold him to the same standards as you hold anything else. You're not waiting for, you know, the plot to kind of be delivered to you in the same way. You just kind of go into it open and ready for whatever it's going to convey to you on its, you know, at its own pace. Now, that being said, you know, when you're young, you kind of make the mistake of sometimes trying to emulate the guys who broke the rules and succeeded. And you realize there's only one Kubrick, and you're not Kubrick, so you have to actually learn the rules before you can break them. So I certainly have made a point to try to learn what the rules are and try to understand the craft, because it's there for a reason, and then understand when you're trying to bend those rules.
Oh, very, very interesting. So I mean, now going on to our next question, and we now go to Universal Soldier. So just before I really ask you about this, obviously I remember when I first saw the first Universal Soldier film, and I think the thing that really struck me most about it was obviously the way Emmerich directed some of the scenes, and especially the climactic scene between Dolph and Van Damme. But really, it was only Dolph's performance in the film, and actually how he created this crazy character, and also the whole philosophy of these Universal Soldiers, these soldiers that never really die. Obviously, when I watched it again, I felt that, I don't know, like, I felt that maybe Van Damme could have maybe been a bit more serious, but I feel like if the Van Damme, the star, sort of superseded his performance in the film. But I just felt like, even though Dolph really brought a very deep and thought-provoking performance in the film, which I just felt was overlooked because it was a quote-unquote an action film. But again, just the climax of that thing with Van Damme fighting Dolph was just like in the rain, how it was shot was great. And then we then had Universal Soldier 2, which obviously wasn't really too good. Apart from really Michael Jai White, it wasn't really too good. So then, so all these years passed, and we all thought that the whole Universal Soldier like franchise had died. And then I then saw this thing called Regeneration, and I was like, okay, what is this about really, And then I then got the DVD, and then obviously the Hyams, because I knew because when I saw Hyams, I was like, oh yeah, Hyams, that rings a bell. And I remember, yeah, Hyams, End of Days, Time Cop. So, but then I didn't realize, oh, no, it's not actually Peter Hyams, it's actually John Hyams. Okay, so this might be his song. But I remember when I was watching it, and even from the first scene, I was like, yeah, this really doesn't feel like, an action film that you would really get in the 2000s, in the millennium. And then even by the time I finished the film, I was like, yeah, it just doesn't feel like a film that I'd pay, 8 or 9 pounds for and be inundated with CG explosions, CG blood, and all this stuff. Like, everything felt really real. Van Damme was actually sort of like, the Van Damme star was sort of like dismembered, and we actually got Van Damme being serious, and again, Dolph delivered it again. And it was, and even just the way it was shot, the tone of the film was like, no, it was very hardcore. Again, obviously there were bits in it where I felt like if it's dragged a bit, especially with the bits with the scientists and everything. But I just felt that as a whole, again, okay, it wasn't perfect, but it was the delivery in the action scenes, the delivery in how it looked. It just felt like, no, it's offering something that we haven't really seen since like the early 90s, from an action film. So really the question I wanted to ask to you is, how did that project come about and fall to your lap, Regeneration?
Well, what happened was I had, at the time, like I said, I'd been doing documentary films, and then I started just doing episodic television for a little while, and TV dramas, and then I was producing TV for a while, and then I kind of went back to documentaries again. And then at a certain point, I decided I was hoping to make a jump into features, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to go about that. And so I started just taking some jobs doing storyboarding work. And I had been working for the producer, Moshe Diamant. I had done some storyboard work for him for a few of his movies. And I think it's turned out to sort of just be a perfect storm of events, but they had this property that was Universal Soldier. They needed, it was a movie that several people was in their best interest to get a movie made, and so what they needed to do was convince Van Damme and Dolph to make the film. And since I think that he asked my father to do it, and he didn't have an interest in doing it, he didn't want to direct it, but I think they realized if they got someone named Hyams, the son of, that because Van Damme had done a couple movies with him, and those were certainly some of the better movies he'd done, that might be a way to get him to agree to be in the movie. And so that's why they came to me with it. And at first I read the script and I thought, well, the script, it really needs a lot of work in my mind. But they seemed to be very open. They were like, listen, if you can get this thing made, we can, whatever it takes to get these guys, basically Van Damme and Dolph, to agree. If you can get them to agree, you can more or less take the story where you want. With a few restrictions, I still had to stay within the general frame what they had, which is like it's going to be, you know, take place in Chernobyl and all that kind of thing, because they basically had a location already picked out, and they could do it for a certain amount. They want to do it in Bulgaria. So within that framework, I tried to. I met with Jean-Claude and I met with Dolph, and I tried to think about what I could do with it that would make it interesting to me. And I think my feeling was that I think the script was, you know, tonally it went kind of different directions. There was some kind of tongue-in-cheek humorous elements, and there was, you know, and it was a little bit very reliant on the page on kind of CGI elements and everything. And I think I wanted to do kind of what you're saying. I said, well, how would I make this something that I'd be interested in seeing? And the way I figured I would do that would be to make it something that at least was taking action and taking the kind of sci-fi storyline very seriously, so that you were really trying to make a sci-fi action thriller and make a hard one and make an R-rated one, and let the violence be really kind of have an impact, rather than just like fighting for fighting's sake. Let the fights be, you know, since I can't afford to do spectacular fights in the sense of G.I. Joe or something like that, which involves a lot of digital compositing, or Fast and Furious, but I can make it R-rated so that when guys are hitting each other or doing things, it leaves a mark and it has an impact. And so I just tried to focus on, you know, I just tried to look at the most dramatic elements of the story and of the mythology. And to me, the most interesting thing about the mythology to me was the kind of Frankenstein myth. You know, these scientists playing God and the implications of that. And to me, that was a lot more interesting than the crime of somebody kidnapping the prime minister's kids and they're going to blow up some reactor. Like that seemed like really just a MacGuffin, just kind of a way into the story. But the deeper implications were what happens when you are literally playing God, and that, you know, the result of that usually in the sci-fi narrative landscape is that it comes back to haunt you. And so how do I create a scenario where the end of this movie and the last 20 minutes of the movie are just the inmates running the asylum, you know? And so that was kind of where I started, and ultimately Jean-Claude and Dolph were able to get on board, and the producers and the rights holders were able to get on board, and it was certainly a real education, because it's when you come into something like this, you have a lot of people that you have to that have approval. You know, you have to get a lot of different people's approval on every single thing you're doing on a movie like this, a part of a franchise where there's, like I said, rights holders and performers who have already, you know, created these characters. So that was, you know, that was kind of how the movie came to be. And then, and once we were kind of off to the races, then I was surprising, you know, it was surprising how much control they kind of handed over to me once we kind of got running. It was really up to me to just deliver it and keep the right people happy.
Okay. And also, and how was it working with your father being the DP? How did that work out?
Oh, well, I mean, that was it was a great opportunity. I think we realized, you know, who knows how many chances we'll get to do something like that. And it was important that he it was important to even get the movie made that he be shooting it. At the time, I was unproven in the feature world, so it was great insurance policy to have him around as far as Van Damme and them were concerned. And for me, it was just a lot of fun. I've worked on a lot of my dad's movies, and been, you know, I've edited movies of his, and I've been, you know, been a grip on his movies, and so it was great to great. I think it was a fun experience for him to shoot a movie but not be the director.
Okay.
You know, and and not have to have that responsibility and just kind of work for somebody else. And it was so it was very. I mean, we have a very comfortable collaboration. We've done it many times before, so it was great. I loved working with him. And that was, you know, hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again one of these films.
Okay, cool. So actually, now can you actually just explain what went into the fights between Van Damme and Dolph, i.e. the preparation, the rehearsal, the planning? Because again, I think what surprised me about that fight was how physical it was. Because I think that, again, when I discuss it with people, I think we're shocked as in how because we're always like waiting for, okay, where's the CGI shot, where's the CGI explosion, because everything was like they were smashing into walls, they were falling over, because I just watched it like a few minutes ago. I mean, they were falling over railings. It was real, it was raw, and you really felt the dust coming through. So how hard and difficult was it to actually film it and make it so effective in a realistic sense?
Well, I think that that was really like probably the sequence that we had that I planned the most for, because it was, to me, regardless of anything else that happened in the movie, and even though it wasn't actually the final fight, I think it was going to be the most important fight in the whole movie because it was Van Damme versus Dolph. You know, that was, as far as the fans of the movie, that's the one that people were going to want to see. So it was important to really make an impact with that one. And again, in my opinion, I was trying to think of, well, if you have characters who are superhuman, then really the most interesting, rather than, you know, you watch a lot of, let's say, martial arts movies, it's generally about characters fighting in wide open spaces, or it can be, you know, it's in order to allow for certain moves that you kind of need some space. But I thought, let's make this fight really just about brute force and less about martial arts. So, you know, the place we started from was like, let's make this fight about bulls in the china shop, you know, so that you have these two super powerful beings, and they are just basically destroying everything around them in the process. And that also, that the fight kind of moves from one location to another, kind of one room to another. They're going through walls and doorways and over railings and ultimately out a window. And so we kind of wanted the fight to follow a path. And it's really not a very long fight, ultimately. It's only a couple minutes long, but it's just these two guys destroying everything in their path. And again, doing it all very practically and with zero CGI. So the way to do it was, I mean, obviously, Dolph and Jean-Claude were heavily involved with what went on in that, but also we really relied heavily on the stuntmen, and they deserve a lot of credit. I mean, the Jean-Claude's double was a guy named Troyan Milanov, and Dolph's double was a guy named Dion Hustov, and those guys were basically, I mean, it was quite amazing what they put themselves through.
I mean, yeah, because the scene that stuck out was, you know, when they fall over the staircase and they land on the stairs.
Yes.
Because I was like, that's like, I mean, how was that actually achieved without broken bones or any serious injuries?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously those guys were taking a lot of hard falls, but so, you know, it's a combination of things. I mean, you know, they're padded up, they're wearing the right kind of pads. They will, you know, as far as going over the railing, they go over the railing. The one angle is kind of down looking, well, there's several angles. So first we have behind them as they go over the railing, and there's a pad that they're landing on below them.
Okay.
We had a camera down below looking up where they go over the railing and hit the pad. But if you see, actually, Troy's arm slams onto the railing when he falls. So it probably left an incredible bruise on his arm. Then we did a shot which was looking at the stairs, where now they're maybe 6 feet up or something like that, and they're padded up, and they drop and land on those stairs and roll and then crash into the doorway. So it was we did it the old-fashioned way, but it was, these guys really did some unbelievable things throughout the course of that. So again, it required a lot of work and choreography and collaboration between the actors, the stuntmen, our stunt coordinator, a guy named Bobby Ilyev, as well as Charles Pacherny, who is our U.S. Stunt coordinator. And it was really just a big collaboration by all these people. Our camera operators, Kenji Luster was our camera operator, and it was and the funny thing about it was, that was our first week of shooting. We had to shoot that scene.
Oh.
So,
yeah.
Usually you want to work your way up.
Yeah. So you already had the big scene in the first week.
Right. So it's the last thing you want, but of course that's how these movies go, is people have schedules and this and that.
Yeah.
So that was really the first thing I shot. And in doing that, I probably shot more takes than I normally would, but we needed to get it right. And I'm pretty pleased in the end with the way it turned out.
Oh yeah, actually, I also even wanted to ask again, because again, just coming off the points about you doing fine arts and being in art school, because I think the best shot in that whole film was when you see Van Damme running across the snow, and you just see, and it's sort of like a long shot, and you just see him running across the snow, and you see like tanks, things blowing up, and so basically it's almost like he's this man on a mission amidst all this carnage happening around him in the snow. So I just wanted to know, was there a film that influenced the visual style of this film? Because it has a very distinct style, and I think that sequence sort of signified what the tone and the visual style was of the film. So how did you come up with the look of the film?
Well, I think that that shot in particular is a good. You're talking about where he sort of goes on that rampage and we're following behind him and he's shooting the guy. Is that what you mean?
I think it's sort of like a long shot where he's running across the snow, and there are tanks coming in and there's explosions happening, and it's just him running across the snow.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that what was important with pretty much the way that we shot all of the fights and all of the action in the entire movie, the main thing that I kind of told everybody, or that was really important to me, from the car chase onto the fights onto that sequence, was that the camera will move with the characters, meaning we're gonna these rather than covering action from many different angles with long lenses, and having cameras on tripods or dollies and shooting from being able to set up a lot of cameras, I wanted it to feel very much like a single camera shoot, meaning that the camera's going to move with the character.
Oh yeah.
And when you do that, you don't really allow for the multi-camera look, because obviously your camera's going to get in the shot of the other cameras.
Yeah.
And that's the way to shoot these kind of things on a budget and on a schedule, is kind of committing to the way you're going to do it. So I kind of wanted to take this perspective, and I think it's something that I kind of took even to a more let's say I perfected it more on Day of Reckoning, which was almost embracing this third-person shooter video game aesthetic, where you are kind of over the shoulder of your character as he's entering in different, entering these environments, and that we don't need to have a close-up of the explosion happening. We don't need to have a close-up of a guy getting shot. We'll let these things happen in the background. So what was really important to me was that to have the shooter and the guy getting shot be in the shot together, rather than showing a shot of a guy firing a gun and cutting to a guy getting shot. I wanted all these things to be happening in the frame simultaneously. So, like the shot that you're saying, which is like Van Damme, he comes through the snow and I think that you're talking about the one that's just leading up to that moment, right?
Yeah.
So that one is kind of like, okay, here he comes, and he sort of starts trotting into the distance, and then immediately we cut into this steady cam shot where we're right behind him, and you see him fire and explosions are going off, and it really was like, I was thinking a bit about like Full Metal Jacket, where they were, where you were following these soldiers through this environment. There was smoke and fire and things like that, but you were kind of with them. You were moving with them through the space, and so that was, I think that's kind of where that aesthetic came from. And then again, with the car chase, it's the same thing. Rather than having a car chase where we have cameras everywhere in the police cars locked off on the street, we just made a decision early. Let's make this whole thing essentially happen from the perspective of the kids who are in the back of the car. So that while we do have shots outside of the car, but they're always moving with the vehicle. It's either following it or leading it or profile, or when we're inside the car, we're really only, we don't have cameras from the front looking back at the driver, because the kids only are looking at the back of the driver's heads. So that's where we'll just keep that perspective. Basically, embracing subjectivity. I think subjectivity is very important in action.
Okay.
It allows the audience to experience with the characters rather than watching them from far.
Okay. So now just moving on to Day of Reckoning now. And I think basically, obviously, if you read online or you just read some comments, I think, again, people that have criticisms of this film was the shift in genre of the film. But
right.
I felt that, the shift in genre was a bold move and actually a very good move. Because again, obviously, gonna be fully honest, again, it's not perfect. I felt that, you could have possibly expanded more upon Scott Adkins's story, upon the main character's story, maybe like explain more about where he really came from, and really expand on the Universal Soldier mythos, expand upon this whole religious cult that Van Damme is now developing, But I think that from what you see in this film is that it's the most different of all the other Universal Soldier films, and it's the most violent, and it's really, I think it was a horror movie, I think that it's just interesting going the route of, okay, let's now make this a Universal Soldier movie, a horror movie, almost asking the question, what would a Universal Soldier film look like if it was a horror film? And I think that even with the way it looks, how it felt, how intense the violence was, because there were so many bits where I was like, oh God, what? Oh my God, because the violence was just like, because look, I've grown up, I watched Rambo 2 when I was like 6 years old, so I've seen a lot of violence films, but in this, the violence just seemed just very intense, and I think that it was maybe to do with how it was shot, the tone of the film, and it was just so in your face and so really relentless in it, So I just wanted to know, what was your thinking behind saying, you know what, I want to make a horror movie. I want to really completely flip the tone of these films on its head. So how did that thinking come about to shift genres?
Well, I think it basically came out of the idea when I really, they gave me the opportunity to write this last one, and I think that the way I looked at it was, okay, if I really, my thought was, again, I didn't want to retell the same kind of story, and I thought that I didn't know much more that could be said with those same characters that wouldn't just feel like I was redoing the same thing. And I understand that on one hand, you have a franchise and you have an audience, and so there's on one level you're supposed to meet their expectations. On the other level, you as a filmmaker are trying to carve out your own career and your own story. You know, and it's important to me and probably every filmmaker that you just don't want to repeat yourself. There's just no reason to.
Yeah, there's no point.
And with something like this, I felt like just considering the budget, considering, you know, that this was a pretty cult franchise, that I was going to take the liberty of taking it where I thought it should go. And I knew in the process I would anger some people, or just say, let's say some people would not, who are really fans of the original, might not appreciate it, but it might actually expose it to some people who would never even consider it in the first place. And that was a risk I wanted to take. And the reason why I arrived at that place was, again, because if I look at Universal Soldier and the mythology, as I said, it's a Frankenstein myth. Really, the mythology has a lot more to do with horror to me than it does with action. Action is, you know, an action movie is about people, you know, characters who have a choice, right? Like if you're a Navy SEAL and now you're going to, you know, if you're a character and if you're Rambo, you have a choice as to whether or not you're going to fight. In this is basically a franchise about a slave race created by humans to do their dirty work. So when I really thought about it, I felt like this is horror first and foremost. And so to me, because the characters I empathized with most were the monsters themselves, the creatures, the Universal Soldiers, and I felt like I want to tell a story from the perspective of the creatures. And the way I want to do that is by telling a story from the perspective of a character who doesn't even realize that that's what he is. So it's going to be the movie itself is going to be a journey of self-discovery for this character, and he's going to slowly start to figure out what and who he is. And, you know, to your point of, you know, that you'd like to have seen Scott Adkins' character develop more, or learn more about the Universal Soldier project or program and all of this, to me, it was very important that we, the audience, don't really know anything more than our character knows. And so it seemed, you know, we never were going to cut to a scene over at the Pentagon where they discuss the Universal Soldier program. We're only going to know what this guy's finding out. And so the goal was, what's the least amount of expository information I can have in here and still have the audience go along this journey with this guy and understand. And so that became, you know, something that we had to think a lot about and determine in writing the script and in editing it, what's the least amount of information we could give you so that we maintain mystery and we don't bog it down with exposition, and we kind of experience this with this character. And so those were my motivations for making this radical departure. And, you know, I feel like as much as the movie divided some of the fans of the franchise, it also certainly got me, you know, the movie got the best reviews by far of anything I've ever done.
I'm sorry to always to catch up. I think you actually do make very good points, which I actually didn't really think about, because again, it's like if you even go back to the first Universal Soldier film, and you sort of say, okay, how would you categorize the Roland Emmerich film? Is it really an action film? I don't know. Is it a thriller? Perhaps, because like I wouldn't really, because if you just think about the story and the plot, is that an action film? So if it's an action film, who's the action hero? You know, I mean, what's this thing? So, but I think, you know, the whole thing of like making it a horror movie, it's like, it is. I mean, in a sense, it does have to go into that horror thing of like, these are trained killers, you know?
Right.
And so, thinking of people's criticism towards it, I mean, I think the question you've got to ask them is, okay, what is the genre of this film? How do you categorize the genre of the film? Looking at Roland Emmerich's first film, I don't think you can put it as an action film. And I think
I think that what Emmerich did in his film, which was which was actually a wise choice at the time, and it was very much of the time, is that Emmerich really made it. That film had a lot of humor. It was very much a tongue-in-cheek in sort of how he was dealing with the. So he was able to deal with some of the horrifying aspects of the story by treating it as if, by quite frankly, not taking it too seriously and having fun with it and making it. There was almost something that was, there was a lot of scenes that were straight up comedy in that, with Van Damme fighting with the popcorn and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he was really kind of having fun with it, and that worked, and I appreciated it. But I figured, all right, that's been done. He did that. I'm not going to try and do that. I'm going to try and go the other direction and just make this as serious and dark and almost like a real kind of psychological thriller, and like almost like a Cronenberg type of movie that has this where the main character is going through this almost nightmarish hallucinatory experience because you're putting yourself in the mind of one of these creatures that his mind is being controlled and his thoughts are not his own, and it really it kind of delves into sort of Manchurian Candidate, Parallax View territory of these paranormal thrillers that I love, and I think that's a lot of fun. So our movie is meant to be fun. Don't get me wrong. It's supposed to be a fun movie, but it's fun in the way that horror movies are fun, in that you want to put the viewer through an experience. And again, because of our budget, because of our resources, rather than doing kind of spectacular action, we had to have action that had real impact. So that was why my thought was, well, let's do action as horror, meaning let's take we watch superhero movies where superhuman creatures kind of go toe to toe and punch each other through buildings and all that kind of stuff, like in Man of Steel or whatnot. But what would really happen if you had creatures who were literally superhuman, but they're also flesh and blood? What would what would be the kind of body destruction that would occur throughout these fights? And it would actually be a pretty brutal thing to witness, and that's why we took it to these extremes of literally having fights with weapons where they're leaving the weapon in the guy and keep fighting and then pull the weapon out and pull the knife out and stab him again. I mean, we really are trying to just push the physicality of it to extremes that you weren't familiar with seeing. And so have guys fight with aluminum baseball bats, have guys have a gunfight in close quarters where they're shooting each other and still fighting, have an axe fight where they're actually like chopping pieces of their bodies off and still fight. What are the different places we can take all this? And so that's sort of the fun of it all, really.
But again, just even going back to Emmerich's film, I think again, which is what I said, like when I talked about the film to begin with, I felt that Van Damme and Dolph were sort of in two different films. I felt like Van Damme was maybe Emmerich's vision of like more tongue-in-cheek and comedy. But again, I thought Dolph's performance was really taking the film into a much more psychological territory. I
agree.
And I just saw, because it's really, that was what I was drawn more towards, was like, wow, this is what Dolph's really doing to the character and what he's really, going through. I mean, how he's really presenting it in a psychological sense is actually really interesting. But they didn't really go that route. But I think that with the idea of Reckoning, it's sort of really expanding upon, let's actually investigate the psychology of that whole thing. I mean, so obviously just moving on, so just get through these questions. So could you actually take us through, so it's sort of like a double-barred question. So firstly, it's how did you go about casting the great Scott Adkins? And that's pretty crazy, legendary one-shot take of Adkins pretty much destroying all of the Unisouls in that underground layer where you did it all in one moving shot. So how how were you able to pull that off?
Well, I mean, the first, to answer the second part of your question, the way we pull it off is by casting Scott Adkins. So that's
Yeah.
the first part, and that's really the most, and that kind of is the answer to that question. My feeling on this movie was that it was important, again, to try to introduce a new type of storyline and find a whole new story, that I thought we should introduce a new protagonist in this, and that Van Damme's character would be really the destination for our protagonist. That would be, the whole movie would be about finding the Luke Devereaux character.
Oh yeah.
And so I thought, there was various reasons why I wanted to do that, but the most important was I was very interested in shooting action a certain way, shooting it, with a little wider lenses, and shooting it where you're really seeing, where it's what is happening is not completely dictated through cutting, but actually you're seeing almost like as if you were filming Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing. You're not going to shoot them with quick cutting close-ups. You're actually going to back off and let them execute their choreography, and so that the audience can actually see that these people can really do this. So that was the challenge, was finding people who could do these. And Scott Adkins is someone who had actually gotten in touch with me shortly after Regeneration. We'd worked with a lot of the same people, and he appreciated what I'd done in that movie, and knew we were doing another one, and kind of expressed an interest in possibly working together. And he was always in my mind, and when we went about thinking about who was going to play this role, to me it was very important that it was an actor. I didn't want just a pro fighter or something like that. I wanted somebody who could act. But once I started working with Larnell Stovall, the fight choreographer, and starting to conceive of this action, we started to realize that you couldn't just get any actor to do this, and it started to feel like, at the time, well, there really is nobody else in the world who can do this specific character as well as Scott Adkins. He's just pretty much the perfect guy. That at this point in his career, at this point in my career, and this type of character, it just seemed like something he was perfectly suited for. And I really couldn't have been more pleased with the results. I mean, I really loved working with Scott. He is one of the hardest workers I've ever worked with, not just as far as his choreography, but also performance, which was incredibly important to him. And it wasn't an easy role, because you had to play a character who's almost in every single scene in the movie, and he's in basically every single action scene in the movie. And on top of that, he also has to play a character that on one level is emotionally very distant, because he's not really connected with his emotions. So you can't just have him acting like a normal human being and emoting and talking in the same way a normal human would. But by the same token, we also don't want to give away right off the bat exactly who he is. So it's kind of a mysterious character, and he had to ride this line of being kind of closed off emotionally, but also revealing his own kind of torment and confusion. And I think that Scott, and not to mention he had to play scenes acting with himself.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was just a hell of a challenge for an actor, and I think he did a brilliant job, and it was really a pleasure working with him.
Okay. And what about the great Roy Jones Jr.? How did that actually come about, getting Roy Jones?
Well, Roy was, that was kind of an interesting thing, because we had written that role for, when I originally wrote it, I kind of assumed it would be a stunt performer who would play that role, because it was someone who was going to have to be able to, exhibit some, fighting ability and nail the choreography, and also have to kind of take some hits and do some stunt work.
Oh, okay.
And in the process of casting that role, our production manager, Deidre Lacasse, was mentioned to me. She's from Pensacola, Florida, and she said she knew Roy Jones Jr. and knew he was, wanted to, he's done some acting in some movies and was interested, and would I be interested in working with Roy? And at the time, I felt, well, geez, number one, I don't know the man at all, so I don't know if he's going to be, I'm pretty sure the production's not going to be able to pay him what he deserves. Is he going to be, is being such a legend that he is on this kind of production, I just didn't think that he was going to go for it, not to mention, I don't know the guy, so is he going to have like some big entourage, and is he going to be kind of like a diva? And so I just thought it sounded like more trouble than it was worth. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line was that I was completely wrong about that. He turned out to be, one of the nicest guys I've ever worked with, and I didn't think that he was going to be a diva necessarily because he's Roy Jones, just because he's a professional athlete and a legendary professional athlete. You don't really know what you're getting, but I mean, Roy was really could not have been a cooler guy. He was a great guy. He was completely prepared. He learned the choreography. He was kind of down with anything we were doing, not to mention he was cool with lying down on the ground covered in blood and the whole thing. And in between takes or in between setups, he just stayed on the set. A lot of actors go back to their trailers. He just stayed right there, was, hung out, talked to people. I mean, he was just a great guy. I have tremendous respect for him as an athlete, but also just as a person and as a performer. And he did a beautiful job. So it was really a thrill for me to get to work with him.
Oh, okay, that's cool. That's very good. So now, I just want to just ask you now much more of like a larger question in the scheme of the movie industry and everything. And really, it's pretty much for you to give your thoughts on the lack of rated 18 action films that are released in major cinemas now, and whether you feel that there is a future for the rated 18 action film, geared towards guys. I mean, do you feel that, we can pretty much see a return of the kinds of Predators, Commandos, Cobras, Time Cops that we saw?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think that, to me, this whole issue of making everything PG-13 is really, to me, I can't stand it. I hate it because I think it's, first of all, it's false. I don't think, as much as executives and everyone try and prove that rated R movies lose money, they forget that The Matrix was rated R. There's tons of movies. Not to mention, I know it's not an action movie, but The Hangover is rated R. The rated R. When I was a kid, I saw every single rated R movie, and there's so many ways that people watch movies today. Yeah. Rated R, I think it's really an incredible shame that they try and turn. Now they're trying to turn horror movies into PG-13.
Yeah.
To me, it's just it's ridiculous. I mean, look at Quentin Tarantino's movies. Look at everything from Pulp Fiction to Kill Bill to Inglourious Bastards, to Django Unchained. Those movies all make a lot of money, and they're all R-rated movies. So, to me, I certainly hope and pray that it's not the end of the R-rated action movie, because I think those are the best kind. And there's plenty of movies, for kids to go see if they want to see kids movies. But if you want to see, a movie that actually has the kind of action and that where two people have a fist fight for 5 minutes and you don't see a drop of blood on them. I mean, that's what PG-13 is. To me, that's more irresponsible than showing violence for what it is. To me, the PG-13 movies are more responsible if they're, you talk about irresponsible violence and responsible violence. The irresponsible violence is the movies that try to make violence look like it doesn't leave a mark, and there's no impact and there's no consequences. To me, responsible action, like Reservoir Dogs, like Goodfellas, to me that's responsible because it's showing violence for what it is, which is brutal. And that's what I try to do in Day of Reckoning. I mean, as much as people say, oh my God, it's the most violent movie I've ever seen. Well, I mean, it is, but that's what happens when people fire a gun at each other. It's a pretty brutal, gross thing to look at. And if you want to have a movie about people who kill each other and harm each other, then don't make it look like it's a fun thing. Show it for the brutal ugliness that it is.
Okay, so let me ask you this question then. So I want you to give me your honest answer. So let's say a studio exec, he walks in, he has his shades on, his suit on, and he's got a briefcase full of money and everything, and he says to you, Mr. Hyams, I want you to direct this next big studio summer film, and it is a PG-13, massive $100 million studio movie. This is going to give you huge exposure. It's going to be a massive summer release. Would you do it? Would you accept it?
Yes, I would. I would because I'd be crazy not to, because that's, at a certain point I can't, I'm still trying to be a part of this system. I still want to make the movies I want to make, but, I don't think Christopher Nolan is going to get to make The Dark Knight if it's R-rated. So right now, that's the system that we're working in. And so if a studio wanted me to make a big $100 million movie and it had to be PG-13, I'd have to find a way to work within those parameters. And there are certain movies, like let's say the Bourne franchise, which is PG-13, and that worked great. I think for something like The Expendables that Stallone did, that is really an R-rated franchise, and it's supposed to be. And I appreciate it. I like that he does that. I remember there was a while where they thought it was going to be PG-13, and that would have been a real letdown because it's meant to be R. So it really depends on the movie, but I would love the opportunity to work within the studio system. I think that would be a challenge I haven't had an opportunity to be a part of yet. But if you can make a studio movie that succeeds, then that's just going to open up more opportunities for you. So I'm certainly open to those kind of opportunities, but I don't think that's the next thing I'll be doing, though. I think it's because I don't necessarily. I think that I still will be making movies that are for a lower budget, genre kind of movies right now, because that's probably what is available to me right now as far as the market is concerned. But I would certainly love a chance to do a studio movie. You would have to, but of course, you have to make the decision based on the movie. So if the movie is good and has potential to be good, then I'd be interested. If it's inherently just terrible and embarrassing, then you make that decision. So my goal is to make movies that I think are quality and good and have make an impact on the people that see them. That's what's important to me. But so I have to be realistic, though. If I gave you another answer, I'd be either lying or I'd be foolish.
Okay. So, and final question now before you have to go. Is there any projects that you aspire to do? Like, if you were to say this is your one dream project, a project that you would really want to do? Because obviously, from the way that I see you and how I've been preaching to guys, is that I just think I believe this is the man who can sort of bring back the violence action film of the early 90s. Because I see a lot of these films that that are directed to DVD and low budget, and I see a lot of CG stuff here, a lot of quick cuts here, but it seems that you sort of understand and kind of respect and appreciate the quality of the RoboCops, the Commandos, the Predators, and all these kinds of films. So my thoughts would be think that maybe your dream project would be that kind of hard film in, but much more in a bigger sense. But I may be wrong. Hence why I just want to ask, what is your in this your stage of your career? What would be your dream project? Something that you're dying to get your hands on.
I mean, the truth is, I'm certainly open and interested in those kind of things you're talking about, and I love doing that kind of thing. But actually, the projects that I'm most involved in and interested in right now are actually, while they're still genre pieces, they're quite different. Almost more, I'm really interested in kind of dealing with more minimalistic ideas at the moment. I'm very interested in doing, suspense and thrillers and things that maybe would be, quite frankly, something different than what I've done before. While I'm still interested in crowd pleasing, movies, and I want to make movies that are exciting for an audience, but I'd like to find different ways of achieving that. So, certain thrillers, movies like, there's one movie in particular, like with, if you remember, Breakdown with Kurt Russell. I thought that was a great.
I saw bits of it, yeah, not the whole thing, but bits of it, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a great kind of, again, minimalistic type of thriller. And, so I'm very interested in thrillers and those kind of things. Because to me, the thriller genre is one that encompasses a lot of things. The thriller encompasses action, suspense, drama. It kind of allows you to do a lot of things within one genre. And so I'm very interested in that kind of territory. But most important to me is really doing something that I've never done before. So if I was going to do action, it'd have to be something different than just doing another, another kind of DTV, franchise thing and doing that same kind of thing. I just feel like I've done that. So I need a different kind of challenge. So I'm right now very interested in kind of small, intimate, character-driven, kind of contained thrillers where I can use action and create suspense and do things like that, but that it really what we're really relying on is performance and working with actors who can deliver, performances that can carry a film and keep you engaged. I think that is what movies like Spielberg's Duel, I love that movie. So I think that's kind of the territory that I'm looking in right now. But who knows? We'll see what happens next.
Okay then. Well, just to say that, Mr. Hyams, man, thank you very, very much for actually agreeing to actually do this interview and everything, But yeah, and I just really hope that you gets a really good project that we can actually really see you much more on the bigger scale. Hence why I've been telling guys that I think this Mr. Hyams guy, I think he could be the next big thing, really. So
man, well, I appreciate that.